Being fired was the worst day of my life. I felt lost, alone, and like a complete failure. But what happened next was truly unexpected, and it changed my life forever. My name is Jessica Matthews, and until 3 months ago, I was a senior marketing coordinator at Pinnacle Dynamics, a mid-sized tech company in downtown Seattle. For 2 years, I poured my heart and soul into that job, believing I was building something meaningful. I stayed late, came in early, and genuinely cared about every campaign, every metric, every small victory our team achieved. The morning of March 15th started like any other Tuesday. I grabbed my usual coffee from the lobby cafe, exchanged pleasantries with the security guard, and settled into my cubicle with my laptop and color-coded planner. I had 3 major campaigns running simultaneously and a presentation scheduled for the following week that I'd been preparing for months. At 10:47 a.m., my manager Karen sent me a calendar invite titled Quick Check-In. Nothing unusual there. We had regular one-on-ones every few weeks. I clicked accept and went back to reviewing social media analytics for our latest product launch. When I knocked on Karen's office door at 2 p.m., I expected to discuss the quarterly performance review or maybe get feedback on the presentation I'd been perfecting. Instead, I found Karen sitting across from David Morrison, our CEO, both wearing expressions that immediately made my stomach drop. "Please, have a seat, Jessica," Karen said, her voice unnaturally formal. I sat down, my hands instinctively smoothing my navy blazer. David Morrison was a tall, imposing man in his early 50s with silver hair and the kind of presence that commanded attention in every room he entered. I'd only spoken to him directly a handful of times, usually during all-hands meetings or company events. "Jessica," David began, his tone businesslike and cold. "We've made the difficult decision to terminate your employment with Pinnacle Dynamics, effective immediately." The words hit me like a physical blow. I actually felt my chest tighten, as if someone had knocked the wind out of me. "I'm sorry. What?" "Your position is being eliminated as part of a restructuring initiative," Karen added quickly, sliding a manila folder across the desk. "Your final paycheck, along with information about Cobra benefits, is in there." I stared at the folder, my mind racing. "I don't understand. My performance reviews have been excellent. The campaigns I've been running are exceeding targets. The Henderson account alone brought in over $2 million in revenue last quarter." David's expression didn't change. "This isn't about performance, Jessica. It's about the direction we're taking the company. We're moving toward more automated marketing solutions, and unfortunately, that means some roles are no longer necessary." "But I've been learning automation tools," I protested, my voice rising slightly. "I completed 3 certifications last month. I presented a whole strategy for integrating AI into our current workflows." "The decision has been made," David said with finality. "Security will escort you to collect your personal belongings. We appreciate your contributions to Pinnacle Dynamics and wish you the best in your future endeavors." I felt like I was in a nightmare. This couldn't be happening. Not after everything I'd put into this job, this company. Not after I'd turned down other opportunities because I believed in Pinnacle's mission. "Can I ask why me specifically?" I managed to ask. "There are 3 other coordinators on the team." Karen shifted uncomfortably in her seat. "Jessica, please don't make this harder than it needs to be." But David leaned back in his chair, and I caught something in his expression that made my blood run cold. "If you must know, we need team members who are more adaptable, who don't push back on executive decisions or question established processes." The implication was clear. I was being fired not for poor performance, but for having opinions, for speaking up in meetings, for suggesting improvements and asking difficult questions about budget allocations and strategic direction. 20 minutes later, I was standing in the lobby with a cardboard box containing my desk plant, a few personal photos, and the coffee mug my mom had given me for my birthday. The security guard who'd been so friendly that morning wouldn't make eye contact as he held the door open for me. I sat in my car in the parking garage for almost an hour, crying and replaying the conversation over and over. How was I going to pay my rent? How was I going to explain this to my family? How was I going to face the job search, knowing that potential employers would ask why I left my previous position? But as the initial shock wore off, something else began to take its place. Anger. Pure, burning anger at the injustice of it all. I hadn't been fired for being bad at my job. I'd been fired for being good at it, for caring enough to challenge the status quo when I saw inefficiencies or missed opportunities. That evening, I sat in my small apartment with a glass of wine and my laptop, staring at a blank social media post. I'd been active on LinkedIn and Twitter for years, sharing industry insights and building a professional network. My followers knew me as someone who was passionate about marketing and authentic in my communications. I started typing. Today, I was fired from my job at Pinnacle Dynamics. Not for poor performance, but because I pushed back on executive decisions and questioned established processes. In other words, I was fired for doing my job well and caring about the company's success. I paused, my cursor blinking after those words. Was I really going to do this? Was I really going to put my former employer on blast publicly? Then I thought about David Morrison's cold expression, his dismissive tone, the way he'd made it clear that my passion and dedication were actually liabilities in his eyes. I thought about all the other employees who might be facing similar situations, too scared to speak up because they needed their jobs. I kept writing. Over the past 2 years, I've helped Pinnacle Dynamics exceed revenue targets, launch successful campaigns, and build stronger customer relationships. I've worked nights and weekends, not because I was asked to, but because I believed in what we were doing. I've presented ideas that have saved the company money and generated new business opportunities. My fingers moved faster now, the words flowing out of me like water breaking through a dam. But apparently, in today's corporate culture, being passionate about your work is seen as problematic. Asking questions about budget allocations makes you difficult. Suggesting improvements to established processes makes you not adaptable enough. I took a sip of wine and continued. I'm sharing this not to bash my former employer, but to start a conversation about what we value in our workplaces. Do we want employees who nod along and follow orders without question? Or do we want people who care enough to challenge us to be better? I attached a screenshot of my last performance review, which had given me ratings of exceeds expectations in every category, along with a photo of the award I'd received just 6 months earlier for Outstanding Marketing Innovation. I don't know what's next for me, but I know I'll never apologize for caring about my work or for speaking up when I see opportunities for improvement. To anyone else going through something similar, your voice matters, your ideas matter. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. I added the hashtags #WordsU Workplace Culture, #WordsU's Marketing Jobs, Pinnacle Dynamics, Corporate Accountability, and hit post before I could change my mind. Within an hour, the post had dozens of likes and comments. By the time I went to bed, it had been shared over 100 times. When I woke up the next morning, my phone was buzzing with notifications. The post had exploded overnight. Thousands of likes, hundreds of comments, and shares that seemed to multiply by the minute. People were sharing their own stories of being fired for similar reasons, expressing outrage at corporate cultures that punished passion and initiative. But it was the comments that really caught my attention. Several people mentioned they had connections at Pinnacle Dynamics and had forwarded my post to current employees. Others said they were customers of the company and were reconsidering their business relationships. Then came the screenshots. Someone had captured internal Slack messages from Pinnacle Dynamics employees discussing my post. Most were supportive, with people saying they'd always respected my work and were shocked by the firing. But a few messages revealed more troubling information. One employee had written, Jessica was fired because she questioned the Henderson account strategy in the executive meeting last month. David was furious that she had data showing his approach was flawed. Another, this is the third person this year fired for attitude problems. Really just means they spoke up when something didn't make sense. These screenshots started circulating along with my original post, and suddenly the story was bigger than just my experience. It was becoming a case study in toxic corporate leadership and the suppression of employee voices. Local business journalists picked up the story, the Seattle Times ran a piece titled, "Tech Workers' Viral Post Sparks Conversation About Corporate Culture." A popular business podcast reached out for an interview. My LinkedIn profile was getting hundreds of views per day. But the real momentum came when TechCrunch published an article about the situation. They'd done their own research into Pinnacle Dynamics' recent employment practices and found a pattern of firing employees who'd raised concerns or suggested changes to company policies. The article quoted employment lawyers discussing the legal implications of firing employees for questioning processes, and included statements from several former Pinnacle employees who'd had similar experiences. Within 48 hours of my original post, Pinnacle Dynamics was trending on Twitter. The company's stock price had dropped 3%. Customer service was apparently fielding calls from clients expressing concern about the company's treatment of employees. I watched this unfold with a mixture of vindication and anxiety. I'd wanted to make a point about workplace culture, but I hadn't expected it to become a full-blown corporate crisis. On Thursday morning, 2 days after my post went viral, I was sitting in my kitchen reading the latest news coverage when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a number I didn't recognize. "Jessica Matthews?" The voice was crisp, professional. "Yes?" "This is Patricia Williams from Morrison & Associates Public Relations. I'm calling on behalf of Pinnacle Dynamics. Mr. Morrison would like to schedule a conversation with you at your earliest convenience." My heart started racing. What kind of conversation? "I think it would be best if Mr. Morrison explained that himself. Are you available this afternoon?" I almost laughed. 2 days ago, David Morrison had had me escorted out of the building by security. Now he wanted to schedule a convenient time to chat. "I'm available," I said, "but I'd prefer to meet in a public place." "Of course, would 3 p.m. at Café Allegro work for you?" I agreed and spent the next few hours trying to prepare for whatever David Morrison might want to discuss. I assumed it would be some kind of legal threat, an attempt to get me to take down my post or stop talking to journalists. I was wrong. When I arrived at the cafe, David was already there, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups of coffee. He looked different somehow, less imposing than he had in his office. His usual confident demeanor seemed strained. "Jessica," he said, standing as I approached. "Thank you for coming." I sat down across from him, accepting the coffee he'd ordered for me. "Mr. Morrison." "David, please." He ran a hand through his silver hair. "I owe you an apology." I blinked. "I'm sorry?" "What happened on Tuesday was wrong. The way I handled your termination was unprofessional and, frankly, unfair. I've spent the last 2 days reviewing your work, talking to your colleagues, and examining the circumstances that led to my decision." He paused, looking out the window for a moment before continuing. "I was wrong about you, Jessica, and I was wrong about what kind of employees we should value at Pinnacle Dynamics." I stared at him, unsure how to respond. "Okay. Your post has forced me to confront some uncomfortable truths about how I've been running the company. The feedback I'm getting from employees, customers, and industry colleagues has been eye-opening." He pulled out his phone and showed me a series of messages. "These are from our biggest clients, expressing concern about our corporate culture. This one is from a potential investor who's putting a deal on hold until we demonstrate a commitment to valuing employee input." I read through the messages, recognizing several major account names. "I see. But more importantly," David continued, "I've been hearing from our employees, people who've been afraid to speak up because they saw what happened to you and others. People who have ideas and concerns that I've been too proud or too stubborn to listen to." He leaned forward, his expression earnest. "I want to offer you your job back, Jessica. Not just your old position, but a promotion? Senior marketing manager, with a 20% salary increase and direct reporting to me." I nearly choked on my coffee. "You want to rehire me?" "I want to do more than that. I want to rebuild Pinnacle Dynamics culture from the ground up. And I need someone who isn't afraid to challenge me to help do it. Someone who cares enough about the company to risk their job to make it better." I stared at him. processing this completely unexpected turn of events. Why should I trust you? Because you have leverage now, he said simply. Because the whole industry is watching to see how I handle this situation. Because I've realized that my old approach wasn't just wrong, it was bad for business. He pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. This is a formal offer letter. Take your time to review it, discuss it with whoever you need to discuss it with. There's no pressure and no timeline. I opened the folder and scanned the contents. The salary increase was actually closer to 30%. The job description included responsibilities I'd been unofficially handling for months but had never been recognized for. There were clauses about company culture initiatives and employee feedback systems. There's one more thing, David said. I want you to know that I'm implementing a new policy company-wide. Any employee who faces retaliation for raising concerns or suggesting improvements will have direct access to me, no questions asked. And I'm establishing a quarterly review process where every employee can provide anonymous feedback about management decisions. I looked up from the offer letter. That's actually a good start. I know I have a lot of work to do to rebuild trust, both with you and with the rest of the team, but I'm hoping you'll give me the chance to prove that I can learn from this mistake. I closed the folder and looked at him directly. If I come back, things will be different. I'm not going to stop asking questions or challenging decisions I disagree with. That's who I am. That's exactly who I need, he said. That's exactly who we need. We talked for another hour about the specifics of the role, the changes he was planning to implement, and the timeline for my potential return. By the end of the conversation, I found myself cautiously optimistic. But I wasn't ready to make a decision on the spot. I told David I needed a few days to think it over, and he agreed without hesitation. That evening, I called my parents and my best friend to get their perspectives. My mom was skeptical, worried that it might be a trap, or that the same problems would resurface once the public attention died down. My dad, ever practical, focused on the financial benefits and career advancement opportunities. My friend Kelly, who worked in HR, was fascinated by the whole situation and helped me think through the potential risks and benefits. I also reached out to some of my former colleagues at Pinnacle Dynamics. Most were supportive and excited about the possibility of me returning. Several mentioned that there had already been noticeable changes in the company culture, with David being more visible and approachable, and management being more open to feedback. But it was a conversation with Tom Chen, one of the senior developers, that really helped me make my decision. Tom had been with the company for 5 years and had a reputation for being straightforward and honest. Jessica, he said when we met for coffee on Saturday morning. I've never seen David Morrison admit he was wrong about anything, ever. The fact that he's not just apologizing but offering you a promotion and implementing policy changes, that's unprecedented. But what if it's just for show? I asked. What if he's just trying to make this go away? Then you'll know pretty quickly, Tom said. And if that happens, you'll be in a better position than you were before. You'll have a higher title, more money, and a proven track record of standing up to problematic management. Plus, every recruiter in the city knows who you are now. He had a point. The viral post had certainly raised my profile in the industry. I'd already had several recruiters reach out with opportunities at other companies. But there was something appealing about the idea of going back to finish what I'd started. I genuinely cared about Pinnacle Dynamics and the work we were doing. If there was a real chance to make the company better, to create the kind of workplace culture I'd always believed in, wasn't that worth exploring? On Sunday evening, I called David Morrison and accepted the offer. My first day back at Pinnacle Dynamics was surreal. Word had gotten out that I was returning, and several colleagues stopped by my new office. Yes, I had an office now, to welcome me back. The energy in the building felt different, more open and collaborative. David had scheduled an all-hands meeting for my first week back, where he publicly acknowledged the mistakes he'd made and outlined the new policies being implemented. He also announced that I would be leading a company-wide initiative to improve communication and feedback processes. Jessica's experience taught me that we can't afford to silence the voices of people who care about our success, he said to the assembled employees. We're not just bringing her back because she went viral. We're bringing her back because she represents the kind of employee we should have been celebrating all along. The response was overwhelmingly positive. In the Q&A session that followed, several employees asked questions and shared suggestions that would have been unthinkable just a few weeks earlier. Over the following months, I worked closely with David and the executive team to implement meaningful changes. We established regular feedback sessions, created channels for anonymous suggestions, and developed processes for evaluating and implementing employee-driven improvements. The Henderson account that had been part of my original firing? My data-driven approach had been correct. The strategy I'd questioned was underperforming. And when we implemented my suggestions, the account's ROI increased by 40%. But the most satisfying part was seeing the change in workplace culture. Meetings became more collaborative. People felt comfortable sharing ideas and raising concerns. The company's employee satisfaction scores improved dramatically. And we started attracting top talent who wanted to work for an organization that valued employee input. 6 months after my return, Pinnacle Dynamics was featured in a Harvard Business Review case study about corporate culture transformation. The article highlighted how a single employee's viral post had catalyzed meaningful organizational change. David Morrison was quoted extensively in the piece, and to his credit, he didn't try to minimize his role in the original problem. I created a culture where employees felt they couldn't speak up without risking their jobs, he said. Jessica's courage in going public with her experience forced me to confront that reality and commit to doing better. The whole experience taught me several important lessons about workplace dynamics, corporate accountability, and the power of authentic communication. First, I learned that sometimes the most professional thing you can do is refuse to accept unprofessional treatment. I had every right to speak up about my firing, and doing so ultimately benefited not just me, but the entire company. Second, I discovered that social media, when used thoughtfully and authentically, can be a powerful tool for accountability. My post resonated because it addressed issues that many people had experienced but felt powerless to address. Third, I saw that genuine change is possible when leaders are willing to admit mistakes and commit to improvement. David Morrison could have dismissed my post as the complaints of a disgruntled employee, but instead, he chose to use it as an opportunity for growth. Finally, I realized that standing up for your principles, even when it's scary, can lead to outcomes you never imagined. I never expected my firing to result in a promotion and the opportunity to help reshape an entire corporate culture. Of course, the situation could have unfolded very differently. Not every company would have responded as positively as Pinnacle Dynamics did. Not every CEO would have been willing to admit fault and implement changes. I was fortunate that the viral attention created enough pressure to force meaningful action. But I also think there's something to be said for the way I approached the situation. I didn't attack David Morrison personally or make wild accusations. I stuck to the facts of my experience and focused on the broader issues of workplace culture and employee voice. I also made sure to frame my post in terms of starting a conversation rather than just venting frustration. I think that constructive approach helped generate the kind of response that ultimately benefited everyone involved. For anyone facing a similar situation, I'd offer this advice. Document everything, know your rights, and don't be afraid to speak up about unfair treatment, but do it strategically. Think about what you're trying to achieve and how you can frame your message to create positive change rather than just expressing anger. Also, remember that going viral is unpredictable and not always positive. I was fortunate that the attention my post received led to good outcomes. But viral posts can also attract trolls, legal threats, and unwanted scrutiny. Make sure you're prepared for whatever response you might receive. Most importantly, don't let fear of retaliation prevent you from advocating for yourself and your principles. Yes, there are risks to speaking up about workplace problems, but there are also risks to staying silent. Sometimes the professional thing to do is to refuse to accept unprofessional treatment. Looking back on the whole experience, I'm grateful that it happened. Being fired was devastating at the time, but it ultimately led to a better job, a more fulfilling career, and the opportunity to make a real difference in workplace culture. I'm still at Pinnacle Dynamics, now as Director of Marketing and Culture Development, David Morrison and I have developed a strong working relationship built on mutual respect and shared commitment to creating a positive workplace environment. The company has continued to grow and thrive, and I believe our improved culture has been a significant factor in that success. Employee retention is at an all-time high. Customer satisfaction scores have improved, and we've been recognized as one of the best places to work in the Seattle area. But perhaps most importantly, I've learned that your voice matters, your ideas matter, and you should never apologize for caring about your work or for speaking up when you see opportunities for improvement. The day I was fired felt like the end of the world, but it turned out to be the beginning of something much better. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us create opportunities for the best things that haven't happened yet. And sometimes, just sometimes, the corporate world is capable of learning, growing, and becoming better than it was before. All it takes is someone willing to speak up and leaders willing to listen. My story went viral, but the real victory wasn't the social media attention or the news coverage. It was the positive change that resulted from one person refusing to accept that passionate, engaged employees are problems to be solved rather than assets to be valued. That's a lesson I'll carry with me for the rest of my career, no matter where it takes me next.